Soul Calibur 2 is the beginning of the series' long association with guest characters, and a beloved game in the series being the third entry. In addition to an arcade release, it came out with 3 console versions for the PS2, Xbox, and GameCube, which is pretty rare to see in a fighting game. Which version had the best guest character was always a topic of debate, and I gotta say my personal vote is for Spawn, but no matter which version you had, everyone could unanimously agree that the graphics were stunning. The visuals hold up well even by today's standards. The opening cutscene is amazingly detailed, and towards the beginning you'll see a glimpse of either Heihachi if you have the PS2 one, Spawn on the Xbox, or Link on the GameCube port. The water effect is especially crazy on these boats here, and the adventurous music alongside glimpses of your characters sets up that you're about to embark on an epic adventure. This thematic thread continues throughout, as when you enter the main screen after you hear the narrator call out
Soul Calibur 2,
you're immediately drawn into the game's gorgeous and elaborate atmosphere. Leaning heavily into themes of adventure, history, and globetrotting, the aesthetic has a razor-sharp direction. For example, there is an embellishment to the menus and stages where you see elaborate gold ornamentation at the top and around the character select screen. The burning flames behind the portraits help emphasize these characters' determination to accomplish whatever their goals may be on their individual journeys. The stages are fantastical renditions of famous scenes or myths from long ago, borrowing heavily from cultural and religious influences from around the world. Individually though, they vary widely in aesthetic. Your characters might battle on the tops of snowy mountains, all the way down to the fiery brimstones of what might be hell. Just an observation, they also mostly take place in the daytime or in a place where you can't tell what time it is, like underground. Not a lot of nighttime representation. Soul Calibur 2 has 15 selectable stages, with 5 of them being unlockable through the single-player mode Weapon Master, which was only in the console ports. To that end, only the 5 unlockable stages have different variations, likely because they were added in later. From what I can see, there are no major differences between the arcade and console versions of the 10 stages that were carried over. There's also one story-only boss stage, which is where you fight Inferno. Even compared to other modern fighting games, Soul Calibur 2 provides tons of information about its stages. To view a stage description, inside the museum and within each character profile, there's a description given for each stage. I'll sometimes mention a summary of each briefly when discussing a stage, since oftentimes it helps give historical context to the references and cultural tidbits you might see. Same goes for the information given in the character profiles. If it's relevant, I will mention it. The names of stages are also found here, since in Versus mode, this isn't provided in the select screen.
The grief reflected in her eyes drives her to the battles.
Eurydice Shrine Gallery is a frequently seen location, having appeared in games before, such as in Soul Edge and Soul Calibur, and after this one, such as in 3 and 6. The description mentions that the shrine is built on a snow-covered mountain. It references Olympians, implying that war on Mount Olympus, which in Greek mythology was the home of the gods. The description continues by stating that this is a gallery built by Hephaestus, the god of fire and forge. It then goes on to tell a small little story about how a blacksmith couple left an offering of a sword and a shield here, but one of those weapons has disappeared. In real life, ancient Greek civilization ended around 600 AD, which is a bit odd seeing as this game takes place in the late 16th century, making it some 1,000 years later. This game possibly could take place in a timeline where it never fell. Normally, I don't like talking about games that came out after the one we're discussing, but I thought that this quote from Soul Calibur 6, which is a very soft reboot but also sequel to Soul Calibur 2, helps shed some light on this situation. It mentions that popular belief in the gods waned, and so the shrine long ago fell into ruin. So perhaps in this parallel timeline, Sophitia, her family, and maybe her village still believe in the ancient Greek gods, but others largely don't. Looking at the stage name, Eurydice in Greek mythology could be referring to several people, the most famous of which is the Eurydice who's the wife of Orpheus. In a famous Greek myth, Orpheus goes to the underworld to find his wife and bring her back from the land of the dead. There are different versions as to how he gets permission to do so, but ultimately Orpheus is allowed to take her back to the world of the living, provided that he doesn't look back until they've returned. Being a tragedy, of course he does so, and she vanishes back into the underworld. Looking at the stage though, I wouldn't necessarily make a direct connection between this myth and what we're seeing. For one thing, we're on a mountain, and I love how the stone is organically incorporated into the structure of the marble temple. The stone tiles are made from marble as well, while the walls are comprised of intricate trimmed Greek columns. These are quite elaborate, more so in the Corinthian style of Greek architecture, some of which are attached by arches at the top. There's also no roof, so I guess Hephaestus didn't care if his priests were comfortable or not. This being her stage, Sophia has a bit of a history with Hephaestus. The statue in the middle of this stage depicts a woman wielding an elk shield and an omega sword, the same weapons that Sophia uses. Examining them in weapon gallery mode, the game mentions the following description. The set was made from holy ore received from the ancient Greek god of the forge, Hephaestus. After Sophia returned from her journey, they were reverently placed in an ancient shrine. Not sure if this statue is meant to be a depiction of Eurydice or another god, or even maybe Sophia herself, but it's not Hephaestus because this is definitely a female figure. The mystery only deepens with the symbol of the Omega shield behind a nearby altar containing two swords, with the bottom slot being missing. Cassandra's profile explains how she took a holy sword blessed by Hephaestus, and after which it disappeared from the temple, so I think it's safe to assume that she's the reason why this is gone. Behind the statue, we can see a large water fountain with a waterfall. The temperature here is so cold that there's parts of the fountain that are frozen over, maybe due to the high altitude of the mountain, which really helps add to that frigid atmosphere. Zooming out, we can see the temple is shaped like a rectangle, open on one side and closed on three others. There's a stunning view of the mountain on the open side, adorned by a different type of column that is twisted at the base, which is a bit unorthodox. I would say these are Greek-inspired rather than something you'd actually see in a temple. Through the columns, you can see clouds rolling onto the floor, which conveys, again, just how high up your characters are. And on the adjacent side, there are gated windows through which you can see even more snowy mountains. The stage song is called Unwavering Resolve, and in line with most of the music from this game, is epic and highly orchestrated. The melody is carried by instruments like trumpet and flute. There are quieter moments within, but for the most part, I would describe it as a triumphant beginning to a hero's quest. A really fun little detail is that an alternative song will play if you pick Link on the stage in the GameCube version, in which case you'll hear a Soul Caliburized version of the Legend of Zelda theme. I would say it's pretty faithful to the original tune, but has additional bits that help immerse it in the Soul Calibur universe. There is an added bridge right before the main theme where it slows down the song, making it significantly more dramatic. There's also a brand new section with descending strings and brass that plays before looping back to the beginning that I quite enjoy as well. Perhaps with Link here, this could be seen as a Hyrulean temple, or at least one that looks like it could be in the same universe. I think the devs made a very deliberate choice here to have the song play, perhaps because they thought that this stage fit Link as well as Sophia and Cassandra, hence the song change. Being a place connected to the gods, this stage excels in its theming. It's a tastefully decorated area, though a bit sparse, and this, along with the snow elements, help convey a sense of purity and clarity. The song slots in very well with the blue-toned desaturated colors of the stage, and having Link's song play here as an Easter egg is just the cherry on top.
The man from the black mist bore the light of madness.
Palgea Shrine. The description states this area is a shrine to the evil god Palgea, and this being a stage is where Astaroth was born. The cult that created Astaroth worships Palgea, who symbolizes snakes and rebirth. The statue in the center is very prominent, with her being an obvious reference to Medusa. Medusa in Greek mythology is a gorgon with live snakes in her hair and whose gaze can turn men to stone. Though the stage could be inspired by ancient Greek culture with the statue, I wouldn't say this area is overly Greek-themed, more so fantasy-like. There's a glowing green jewel on her forehead, and her expression is neutral but intimidating, almost like she's surveying the fight. There's another green jewel in the center of the platform, with an intricate floor and 4 perpendicular lines radiating outwards. Who knows what these green gems are being used for? Maybe as set pieces in some ceremony, or maybe they just make for good decoration. Through the door, you can see what looks like a tunnel with torches that leads to some unknown destination, adding a sense of mystery. The doorframe itself is made from bones or scales, and there's a similar design wrapped around the jewel at the top, with the tips being a lighter gold color, almost like flames. These snake and fire motifs are carried throughout, with another door on the opposite side having the same. There are also 2 torches on the top that add to that menacing atmosphere, and the fact that they're lit lets you know that this temple is being upkept. You also have stalagmites and stalactites all over, so it's likely that the temple was built from an underground cavern. The music is epic and orchestrated, called Evil Reborn, the name being a reference to Astaroth's resurrection after his death at Maxi's hands. It's tense throughout, mostly being in the minor key with all sorts of instruments playing to dramatic effect. The color palette is sinister with the green and black, and combined with the menacing snake statue, this stage adds significant tension to the match. It's also a bit mysterious and intriguing as well, since you have to wonder who this evil god is and what her followers are doing down here.
A difficult journey lies ahead of her.
Souffran's mansion is true to its name, being an old French-style manor in Baroque style, which is the same architecture you see in the Palace of Versailles. It's heavily characterized by very elaborate and ornate detailing, with lots of gilding and curves, and was popular in the late 16th through 18th centuries throughout Europe. There's not a ton of information in the description that can be seen in the stage itself. It mostly talks about how whoever was the master of this manor was poisoned and passed away. It also mentions a visitor who came to this library who left no clue as to what they were doing here and left soon afterwards on a journey. Seems like every description has to have a bit of a mystery to it. This stage is associated with Raphael, and he is likely the man who was in this library since his profile mentions that he found the letter in the library of a mansion that he acquired. With the building built in the Baroque architectural style, there is so much detail to this stage. In particular, I really like the elaborate carpet and wooden flooring. Being a library, there's shelves upon shelves of books, and zooming out you can see that there's multiple floors. Even has a ladder that leads to more levels. These drawers look like card catalog cabinets to me, but these weren't invented until like the mid-1800s, so that's way after this game supposedly takes place anyways. You can see marble columns and an arched nook above this glass door. Clearly, whoever built this had a lot of money, since glass was very expensive back in medieval times. Because the door is see-through, you can see another room on the other side, which may lead to a potential reading room. On one side of the room, there's a curtained glass window with flags above with some sort of crest. These are probably the symbol of whoever lived here. Opposite of that, there's a huge mounted elk head above, so perhaps the master of this mansion liked to hunt. Looking at the open side, we can see that we're actually on the second floor with scattered furniture below. There's light streaming through windows, but it's almost dispersed looking, maybe with there being dust lingering in the air. This adds to the idea that this place has been abandoned for quite a while. Interestingly, there's what looks like a closed door on the other side, not sure where you'd be able to stand once you pass through it. And on either side are statues and a chandelier overhead, and this, along with all the other embellishment, really nails in how much old money is here. The song, called No Turning Back, isn't exactly what I had expected for the stage. Personally, I would have anticipated it to be slightly more laid back, but the song is fast-paced and dramatic, with tense underlying brass and harpsichord. It also doesn't sound particularly French to me. With the guitar and castanets, it reminds me more of Spanish music, but maybe that's just me. The environment is grand and excessively lavish, but all these little details really help you become more immersed in the stage. The color palette leans heavily on the golds and greens and browns, and with the light shining, it actually gives me a little bit of an ethereal vibe. The music I like on its own, but I'm not entirely sure it works 100% with the stage, but at the end of the day, I still get that epic European fantasy vibe, so I suppose it's good enough.
His soul burns violently for vengeance.
Imperial capital Ayutthaya refers to Ayutthaya, which is approximately 8 kilometers or 50 miles north of Bangkok. This city served as the late Siamese kingdom's second capital and was a major influence on modern Thai culture. It existed from 1351 through 1767 and was destroyed during a Burmese invasion. The ruins of the city can actually be seen today and are considered a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The in-game description mentions how this is an imperial villa used to entertain guests, so perhaps this is what the capital might have looked like before it was destroyed. This is Hwangsheo's stage, the only connection being that he passed through this place on his journey. Your characters stand in a grass courtyard with a marble villa in the backdrop. In real life, most of the buildings in the city were built from brick and mortar and not marble like it appears here. The whole structure actually reminds me more of modern Thai architecture, with the decorative wings at the end of roofs called chofa. The gold towers coming from the roof of the villa is probably a prang, which is a type of spire. This building looks almost like a temple rather than a villa to me, and the very colorful trim on the roof is also seen frequently in Buddhist temples in Thailand. Along that same line of logic, there's other religious fixtures with gold chedi with gates on either side of the main temple. Chedi are where important items are stored, like the ashes of an important figure or holy relics. Interestingly, these are surrounded by bright blue water, so not very convenient to get to, I suppose, but they do look spectacular. On the door to the chedi are two yak, who are mythological Thai giants who guard the entrance of Buddhist temples. To the side of the chedi, we see more greenery and another smaller temple behind this large gate. You also have an attached pavilion with a boat, which is sorta in the shape of a dragon boat. The flags and lavish boat help remind you that this is an Imperial villa rather than just a temple. You have another gate on the opposite side, but it's largely the same. One thing that is different though are the ruins across the river, which look similar to what the actual real-life ruins look like today. There's prangs, chedi, what looks like a tomb, and a much simpler dock with rickety boats. Interesting that these look so run down. You'd think that they'd want to clean up things a bit for their guests. Not to mention the capital wouldn't have been destroyed yet at this point, since the kingdom still existed in the 1500s, so seems a little bit asynchronous to me. Perhaps these are older temples that fell into disrepair. The stage song is called Destiny Awaits No One, which stands apart from some of the other songs we've heard in this OST. It's an upbeat song, not particularly Asian-inspired, but there is an exotic sound to it with the chords, percussion, and low flute. It's energetic and optimistic, and compared to the sound of the water flowing, it's quite soothing as well. Combined with the bright blues of the water and stark white of the building, it contributes to the clean, Buddhist-inspired look of this stage.
Entrust your noble soul in your sword.
Pirate's Alcove is a hidden dock inside a cave, formerly where a renowned pirate and his crew once stayed in. I believe the renowned pirate in question is heavily implied to be Cervantes himself, since this is his stage, and in his bio it mentions that he slaughtered his own crew, so you connect the dots. The description goes on to mention how no signs of life can be seen since the captain took the lives of his fellow pirates 10 years ago. But for whatever reason, the cavern remains lit and has a pirate ship, so maybe this place is potentially haunted, or maybe Cervantes did it himself. There's a platform with stone tile and wooden planks on either side. Not sure why they bothered with the tiles honestly, just the bare stone would have probably worked fine. You've got a large ornate pirate ship on one side with the skull and crossbones all over. The skull and crossbones, or Jolly Roger, was an insignia usually on a black but sometimes red background. These were more so seen in the 1700s, although its origins can be traced back about 100 years to the 1600s. The purpose of the Jolly Roger was so that as pirates were attacking other ships as they do, by hoisting this flag, they'd be given the other side a chance to surrender first. Having them outwardly on the ship like this kinda defeats that purpose, but maybe they cover them up ahead of time. Further up the boat, there's an angel head figure at the bow, which is an interesting choice considering these figureheads are meant to represent the spirit of the ship, and pirates aren't exactly known for their piety. There are also these smaller ships scattered about with the Jolly Roger on the sail. This symbol wouldn't be much of a deterrent here since these little one-person dinghies aren't attacking anyone, but they do help keep these boats more in theme. I would guess these are used more so for transporting goods around the cave or as a means of escape if these pirates were ever discovered. On top of these beams are various barrels, maybe holding supplies, next to lit lanterns. And if I didn't know any better, I would say that someone was living here. There's even a small bunker built into the cave as well. This structure is connected by a bridge to the opposite side of the bunker, possibly storage or barracks for the crew. Through the opening, there is even a small cave with palm trees, and a larger cave entrance leads out to the open sea with land in the distance. Even though there is no other people around, there was plenty of wildlife to make up for that. There are sharks that swim in a circle around the stage, but they don't do anything if you knock your opponent into the water. I guess they're either not hungry or not the people attacking kind. And this is kinda hard to see, but by the pirate ship there's a coelacanth, and these are mostly found by the East African coast, so I'm assuming that we're somewhere in that vicinity. Eternal Struggle, similar to the stage, has pirate sound elements with the percussion and syncopated brass, and sections where the melody is carried by trombone. The time signature is also in 6/8, which is very characteristic of this genre. Pirates of the Caribbean is largely credited for popularizing this type of cinematic music, though this was released a year after Soul Calibur 2. The origins of the style aren't clear. I've seen people say that Captain Blood, which came out in 1935, was the origin of this sort of swashbuckling sound, but I'm no music historian. The song definitely has slower parts that are Soul Calibur sounding, such as the section featuring an oboe. Either way, it's very adventurous and triumphant, which aligns perfectly with the environment. The cave exudes a sense of intrigue as well, where you're left with questions such as, what is this place and what is being stored here? I do think it could have been maybe a little fun to add treasure hidden in the back of the stage, but perhaps that would have been a little too gaudy.
Delicate between good and evil wavers within him.
Egyptian Ruins is an underground temple with the walls telling the story of Soul Edge and the events surrounding its existence in ancient Egypt. Someone, according to the stage description, has unsealed this chamber after thousands of years, but for what purpose we don't know. Your characters are surrounded by an endless black pit, where a fall means certain death, the sound of wind rushing to dramatic effect. Perhaps the floor has decayed over time, with the tiles closer to the edges of the platform you're standing on being broken. Or maybe it was always a platform to begin with the fall below being a trap for would-be thieves who might come in and try to steal Soul Edge. My personal favorite detail here are the little snake lanterns, and these are lit, so it aligns with the stage description about someone being here recently. Directly behind the starting position, there's the Eye of Ra and Horus perched on two pillars coming from the void below, with Ra associated with the left eye and Horus with the right eye. Horus and Ra were two gods in ancient Egyptian religion, with Ra representing the sun and Horus representing the sky. These two were often depicted as looking very similar, and sometimes were merged together as one god called Ra Horachti. The story of the Eye of Horus is connected to one of the most famous Egyptian myths, the conflict between Horus and his uncle Set. Set killed Horus's father, which set in motion various events in which Horus tries to reclaim the Egyptian throne from Set. During this conflict, in some versions of the myth, Set steals his eye, or sometimes he eats it, but eventually Horus's eye is restored or reassembled. After getting his eye back, Horus then offers it to his father, who uses the eye to strengthen himself in the afterlife, hence its association with healing and protection. The Eye of Ra, on the other hand, is associated with the god Ra, who is the creator of the world and the god of the sun. Ra's eye by itself is considered a separate goddess called Wijat. She's the feminine counterpart to Ra, helping balance his masculine energy, and serves as his mother, daughter, and sister all in one. The details on top of the eyes, I have no clue what these structures are, but I have a feeling it's just decorative embellishment. Up above is another symbol called the winged sun. This is found in Egypt, but is also found in other areas of the world as well. Exactly what the winged sun represents is heavily debated. Some say it represents the midday sun, with others believing it represents another form of Horus called Horus Behedet, whose main role was to assist Ra in battle. Through the arches and hallway, you can see stairs leading up to a door. Perhaps this is where the sword was stored. To that point, according to a Twitter post made by Hideo Yoshi, who is the art director for the Soul series and did model and texture design in Soul Calibur 2, the blue symbol on the door is meant to represent Soul Edge. On the walls, you can see faux hieroglyphics, along with paintings of the events surrounding Soul Edge. I can't really make out what exactly is being depicted, but there's definitely some sort of struggle over the sword happening, with it featured prominently in each panel. There are pillars around the room, specifically called lotiform columns, named after how the tops look like lotuses or flower buds. There's a hallway leading off to the side with crumbled statues in the back, and on the opposite side, fully formed statues. These could be depictions of whatever king might have ruled during when this temple was built, but could also be meant to house the spirits of deities or important officials. Part of the temple wall has been completely destroyed and exposed to the outside, with two stone obelisks sticking straight into the air. These were often built in pairs and were associated with solar mythology. You can also see a pyramid and palm trees, with this being in the desert, along with lightning and fast-moving clouds. The stormy weather adds pressure to the fight and an ominous atmosphere. The song is called Chasing Death, and it has a distinctly Middle Eastern sound, which can be heavily attributed to the scale it's being played in. The main melody is carried by an oboe or violin, and there are lots of little small percussion flourishes, for example with the maracas making noises similar to rattlesnakes and also xylophone. There's parts where the key changes and the song layers on chanting, which drives the tension way up. For a song called Chasing Death, there are parts of the song that sound quite upbeat, but it's interspersed with high-intensity sections. Listening to this piece, you're taken on a journey in which you're leisurely exploring an ancient tomb and everything is going great, but suddenly you run into a trap or a tricky situation and you're running for your life. The colors of this stage are quite exotic, with the vibrant blues and greens, which I quite like, and overall I think this is a great depiction. There is a real sense of adventure with countless mysteries to unravel with the murals, closed door, and hieroglyphics, but you'd better be careful that you don't accidentally misstep while you're here.
Fate conspired to arrange their battle.
Egyptian Crypt is not to be confused with Egyptian Ruins, which is a separate stage. The colors are very similar, but surprisingly there doesn't seem to be many reused assets. This place lies underneath the mural telling the story around Soul Edge, so in the same location but further down. For not having any Egyptian characters, there sure are plenty of Egyptian stages, but I think this is more so to show how ancient Soul Edge is. As opposed to the previous stage though, you're no longer standing on tile. Depending on which version of the stage you're playing on, the floor can be sand, fire, or ice. For the sand one, the player will sink if they don't keep moving, though the rate at which they sink and how deep they go seems to depend on the spot. The sand slows your walking animation as well, but attacking will allow your character to resurface, making this a stage that encourages aggressive gameplay. This is probably one of the stages that affects this the most, and it's goofy seeing characters still sinking as the winning and losing animations are still playing. Up top you have the winged sun again, and there's a long hallway behind your characters with lanterns leading further down. There's also added lanterns on the wall shaped like birds, which I really love. Though there are no murals on the walls, you can see hieroglyphics instead, alongside pillars made of stacked stone pieces. These elements help distinguish the stage from the Ruins one, where you don't see the exact same assets. You have two Egyptian Ankh, which is a hieroglyph that symbolizes life, and in the middle is a symbol for Soul Edge. On the backside, you can see a staircase leading upwards, perhaps up to the Egyptian ruins. This could be just one chamber in the whole structure to get to where Soul Edge was stored. And I have a theory that the Egyptian ruins and crypt actually make up a pyramid but buried underground by sand. If we think about an underground tomb, typically the lower you go is where you would find more valuables and where an important thing or person would be buried. However, if the structure was originally a pyramid, the more important chambers would be at the top. And if the sword was in the chamber in the Egyptian ruins, which is above the crypt, this would make sense. Of course, I'm probably thinking way too much into this, and who knows if this was actually something they planned for, or maybe they did and I'm totally off. In the fire version, the sand is replaced by metal sheets and the stone with lava, which when stepped in for a period of time will cause a player to take damage. Funnily enough though, you won't take damage if you're laying in it, only if you're standing. The entire room is lit up by flickering red light radiating from the lava below, which creates a higher stakes atmosphere. I do prefer this over just black nothingness. Even without the lava effect, the red ring around the stage just looks so cool. There is also a cage version of the stage that's only in Weapon Master mode that is non-selectable, with lava coming down from the bars, which looks sick. There's a bunch of other stage shapes that are unselectable that you only see in this mode as well, like the one shaped like a triangle or in the shape of a square with no gimmick. The last selectable variation is the ice stage, and this is the one I show to friends who don't even play fighting games. The floor is made from ice blocks, and all the slipping and sliding makes it easy to get knocked off or fall off yourself. Part of the fun of this stage is how all skill just flies out the window, since running to do a dash attack could lead to self-death, and you're trying to get your opponent to make themselves fall off as much as you're trying to push them there. There's an icy wind blowing from the depths below, and everything is blue tinted, including the flames, which gives it a fantastical vibe. Like, why are these flames blue? Well, maybe it's magic. This song, called Maze of the Blade, is slightly intimidating with a slower pace, at least initially. There are lots of small flourishes and a very reedy sounding woodwind instrument playing, maybe a mizmar or argul. There's actually 6 different versions of this song, with parts 1, 2, 5, and 6 sounding very similar. Part 3 builds upon the former and adds additional intensity, but part 4 is definitely the best version. It's faster and there's added percussion, which creates an energetic sound. It's almost like the finale to this match where you know shit's about to go down. Though the 3 versions of the stage are quite different, tonally they're fairly in line with one another. The ice version is probably the most unique and my personal favorite. There's less of an ominous tone, but still mysterious and exotic just like the other 2. I personally enjoy the interesting set pieces and the music of the Egyptian ruins slightly more, but this stage is better to play with friends since the stage hazards make for a really exciting match.
With an iron will, he travels his own path.
Kaminoi Castle, Sakura Dai Gate. I'm assuming Dai here means large, making the title of this stage something along the lines of Kaminoi Castle, Great Sakura Gate. The description mentions that this castle was abandoned during the era of Japan's unification period due to its remote location and how locals believe it to be haunted. It's kinda hard to believe this place isn't being lived in, since with the torches it's clear someone has been taking care of this place and you can hear the fire crackling. Maybe the fire is being maintained by the aforementioned spirits? This is the traditional Japanese-style feudal estate, with a full moon and sakura trees raining petals onto the stage, which adds a very springtime romantic feel. It's so bright out that it's easy to forget that technically this takes place at maybe dawn. Your characters are outside in a rectangular-shaped courtyard, with one side open to the mountains and sunrise or sunset, though I suspect sunrise since you can see some morning fog. Looking into the valley below, there's a river and bridge in the distance, adding to that gorgeous natural atmosphere. As much as I'd love to take a peek, unfortunately we can't look inside the castle, but the exterior looks sturdy, with the foundation of the castle made from stone and speckled with plants and moss, showing its age. There are 2 doors, one with a fence and rake in front, which looks quite well maintained. The other is larger and more prominent, probably the main gate, with torches and wooden carvings of dragons on either side. And on the open side, you can see even more of the castle, implying that this is just one building in a much bigger complex. The song is called Brave Sword, Braver Soul. It's heavily Japanese inspired with sounds such as shamisen, flute, and little vocalizations, but it's not totally traditional since you also hear brass and violin. There's a steady taiko drum and cymbals played throughout that help keep up the energy as well. This specific track is featured in multiple Taiko no Tatsujin games, and the stage also appears in Namco Cross Capcom. In Chapter 11, your characters go to the exact same location, Kaminoi Castle Sakura Dai Gate, and similarly, it's a stone courtyard with cherry blossoms surrounded by castle walls. It's probably actually located on the inside of the doors that we saw in Soul Calibur 2. I will spare you the plot details because it's a whole thing, but in this chapter you have characters from Xenogears, Sakura, Karen, Ryu, and Chun-Li from Street Fighter, Jin and King from Tekken, Felicia, Hisenko, and Dimitri from Darkstalkers, people from Legend of Valkyrie, and obscure Namco arcade games like Shadowland and Genji in the Heike clan, and Fong Ling from Resident Evil Dead Aim, with all these guys fighting against some giant frogs from hell. You also hear the song play when you use Mitsurugi or Taki in battle, which to me sounds pretty much exactly the same, but slightly redone with different instrumentation. The differences between these versions are very slight, so it's probably not noticeable for most people. Overall, this is what the ideal Japanese stage should look like to me. Cherry blossoms, serene nature, and a whimsical energy to the stage song that ties it all together.
Entrust your noble soul in your sword.
XiWei Siege Ruins, according to the lore provided, was a stronghold located on the western border of the Ming Dynasty. This area was essential for maintaining the empire's control over their western territories. The Ming Emperor believed that the castle was keeping Soul Edge hidden in secret, and the citadel was destroyed in an attempt to find it, despite the fact that the attacking army failed to even find the sword. I'm assuming Shi here means west in Chinese. This stage belonging to the Ming Dynasty also makes sense given that Soul Calibur 2 takes place in the late 1500s, which coincides with the Ming Dynasty in China in real life. Interestingly, this is Mitsurugi's stage, and his profile explains that he came here looking for Soul Edge, despite the fact that I think most people associate him with Kaminoi Castle. It's also Xianghua's stage, and her description mentions that she found the sword while under orders from the Emperor, but actually destroyed it after discovering how evil it was. At first glance, this area appears fairly standard for a Chinese-themed stage. There's ornate flooring leading up to a gate with some stone tiles, and on either side there's a mural with 2 dragons, which are typically associated with the Emperor of China and represent power and good fortune. The gray stone is engraved with an auspicious cloud design, which is a traditional decorative pattern meant to bring good fortune and has been seen in China for thousands of years. There is also Buddhist Varja symbols on the bottom and along the sides, which represent absolute stability and is a protective symbol that dispels evil and temptation. Peeking through the gate, we see the main stronghold. To me, these steps look an awful lot like the Forbidden Palace, specifically the Palace of Heavenly Purity. The Forbidden Palace was actually built during the Ming Dynasty as well, but around 100 years prior, so the construction techniques could be very similar. But looking closely at these buildings, you can see one of the roofs has actually burned down, so even with these gates, it seems the building wasn't able to come out completely unscathed. As you swing around, the destruction of the stage becomes evident. The tiles on the walls are broken, and what appears to have been a bridge is completely destroyed. There's crumpled towers along with smoke still rising from the background, so the battle presumably happened very recently. We can see the aftermath of the fighting here with contraptions that have siege ladders attached left behind. The process of trying to scale walls with ladders was common in medieval warfare called escalating. There's also scattered watchtowers and what might be a catapult, all of these being instruments of war. There's a large pit dug around the perimeter of the castle, not filled with water like a moat, but rather spikes. Practical and effective, but not pretty. Despite all the destruction around your characters though, there's a certain tranquility and somberness to this stage with a sunrise or maybe sunset painting the battlefield in yellows and oranges. There's a flickering sun glare effect at certain angles along with the rolling mountains in the distance that enhances that effect. The music is similarly enchanting yet haunting, called Hubris. Perhaps the song name is linked to why the stage looks like this in the lore. The hubris of an emperor who wanted Soul Edge so badly that he destroyed a stronghold of his own kingdom. There's a violin melody at the beginning, and to that more Chinese sound there are parts with syncopated rhythms and a stringed instrument, maybe a sitar. It's emotional and epic with an Asian flair, a fantastic choice for this stage. With the nature in this stage heavily contrasting with the destroyed backdrop, it creates an intriguing stage concept. It's ornate but also dangerous and makes you wonder what exactly happened here for everyone to abandon all this equipment. In fact, who really won at the end of the day? It seems the siege wasn't successful based on the fact that the castle is still intact, though maybe once they realized Soul Edge wasn't here, the attacking army left. We also did see damage to the inside structures with the roof, so perhaps the attackers did find some success in entering the building, but seems to me neither side walked away unscathed.
Bro desires a sword, and a sword desires truth.
Village of the Wind tonally is quite distinct from many of the other stages in this game. First of all, the inspiration comes from Southeast Asian influence rather than Western, and the stage description expands on this by stating that during a time where Western culture spread its way across Southeast Asia, an isolated village hangs on to its cherished faith in the wind deity. With Talon being Filipina, this location is very likely in the Philippines. Your characters stand inside a windmill, gears and blades turning leisurely in the wind. The windmill is made from wooden beams and floor planks with a bamboo lattice in a half circle at the end of the platform. You can also see bamboo ladders with a platform above, perhaps being used by the villagers to repair the structure. There's other windmills in the distance, though these appear to be slightly different, made from stone with thatched roofs. The village has a tiered structure to it with layers separated by stone walls, and these could possibly be based on the rice terraces in the Philippines, with the most famous one, the Ifugao Rice Terrace, being a UNESCO World Heritage Site. With this being a village dedicated to the wind deity, there's what might be a temple or castle in the background, along with a broken stone bridge and mountains surrounding the entire village. The nature is particularly stunning with the sea in the distance, the brilliant morning sun, and the sound of wind blowing. The song is called Guided by the Wind, and it's one of my favorites from the OST, which I would describe as brilliantly hopeful. The main melody is carried through trumpet and sometimes violin. Midway through, a choir comes in, and this section is the cherry on top. The whole song fills you with a sense of optimism, almost like you can feel how excited these villagers are for the future. It is interesting that it's not Southeast Asian sounding at all, but it's a great song regardless. The colors in the stage are a bit subdued and not overly saturated with the morning fog. The sky is pale, and there are shadows on the floor with it still being dawn. Overall, I would say this stage and song are both very well executed and harmonious with one another, much like how the villagers live in harmony with nature and the wind.
Youth and passion combine to create a hardened warrior.
Next up is Hwangseo Palace, which is Seongmina's stage and takes place inside an Imperial villa. It's located on the outskirts of the capital, which is called Hanyang, aka Seoul. The whole complex belongs to the Lee family, were the imperial family during the Joseon dynasty, which lasted from the late 14th century to the early 20th century. The description also goes on to talk about one of the Japanese invasions of Korea, likely the Imjin War or the Chongyu War, which happened in 1592 and 1597 respectively. These were invasions of Korea launched by Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who famously was the retainer of Oda Nobunaga. With this being a Korean imperial villa located in modern-day Seoul and being on the outskirts of the capital, we can conclude that this isn't the main imperial palace of the Joseon dynasty, which is Gyeongbokgung Palace. There are 4 other imperial villas in Seoul, so this location could be possibly based on one of those. I should also mention that much of what I'll be discussing in this stage does have its roots in China, but just note that it also applies to Korean culture as well, since there is some overlap. A good example of this is where your characters are standing. This is a yin and yang symbol, which is a symbol that originated from Chinese philosophy and is seen in Taoism and Confucianism. The two halves represent balanced opposites, but when they come together, they form a greater whole. At some point, Korea adopted the yin and yang symbol and used it to make their own, with the symbol used as the basis for the Korean taeguk, which you can see in the South Korean national flag. With the 3 layers of horizontal lines arranged around the yin and yang symbol, it becomes a Palgea pattern, or 8 trigrams. This was a tool used in ancient Chinese divination to answer questions surrounding a person's life. Depending on the placement of the surrounding lines and whether they're broken or unbroken, determines the distinct element and quality associated with each grouping of 3 lines, after which you can then answer various questions about a person depending on those combinations. I should also note that the trims seen around the sides of the platform are not actually part of the Palgea pattern, but rather some sort of decorative element. This platform is also a bit on the smaller side, and if you were to fall off here, you'd plunge straight into the void. I guess whoever constructed this place wanted to up the stakes of the exhibition matches taking place here. Looking outside, you can see that the stage takes place during autumn with falling leaves and colorful trees, a small courtyard, and more of that imperial complex visible in the distance. On one side, you have a painting of a dragon and of a phoenix on the other. Dragons in Korean culture are typically associated with bringing rain and clouds, called young, and are associated with royalty. In some versions of Korean mythology, these dragons were said to have begun life as lesser dragons called emugi, but they could become full dragons if they obtained a type of wish orb called a sintamani. This might be the orb seen here in the image. In each corner are small pink flowers, which could be Rose of Sharon, which is the Korean national flower. Phoenixes, such as the one on the opposite side, were commonly associated with female royalty and represented immortality, authority, and rebirth. Dragons and phoenixes were associated with one another and with the emperor and empress respectively, and therefore were often seen together, much like on this stage. The ceiling is also quite elaborate in the Dangcheong coloring style, in which each traditional color represents a cardinal direction. Though these chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, I'm pretty sure are not traditional at all. I think they're just here to light this area up at night. There's a set of steps leading up to a throne with lamps on either side. The stage description mentions how this platform is used for exhibition matches, so this seat I suppose is where the Imperial family would watch these matches from. There's also a nighttime variation of the stage. The only main difference here is that the chandeliers and lamps are lit up and the night air is still. It's also one of the only night stages in the whole game. The stage song is called Sword of the Patriot. In line with its name, it does have a very patriotic, adventurous feel with the drumming at the beginning, steady percussion throughout, and heavy use of strings and brass. It is a really good song, but I also maybe would have liked to see some more Korean influence here. I couldn't tell you if this belonged to this stage, or plays when you're on top of a mountain, or when sailing down a river on a boat. For the night version especially, I do think a more subdued song perhaps would have aligned better with the tranquil vibes of the stage, but this is such a small little nitpick. Overall, the song and stage fit together seamlessly, and the colors here are especially gorgeous with the fall leaves.
Seeking to complete itself, a fragment takes on human form.
Lakeside Coliseum takes inspiration from ancient Rome, this arena being located somewhere in Europe. This stage also appears in Soul Calibur 3 and serves as a hub for rich patrons to watch duels to the death. It's kind of similar to gladiator matches in the Coliseum long ago, which very likely served as a loose source here. But instead of watching from the sidelines, these wealthy individuals have the option to sit even closer on boats floating around the ring. The entire arena is currently empty, however, so perhaps this is before the spectacle takes place. There could also be other technical reasons why they didn't want to animate any NPCs in the background, since that might take more processing power and resources needlessly. This is Necrod's stage, but his profile doesn't give any indication as to why. I can maybe put a guess out that he's here to fight in the battles that take place on a quest to find the fragments of Soul Edge that have led him here. Your fighters are in a stone ring surrounded by water set inside a cave. There's an arch with boats underneath, but these are so far away that this would honestly be a terrible view. I would assume that these boats actually come out and surround the main platform when there's an actual match happening. There's various flags, curtains, and torches, which wouldn't be of much use for the people fighting in the money match, so I'm pretty sure these are here to make the place more comfortable for the patrons watching. The stage architecture leans heavily on Roman influence, with the private viewing area above having a pediment and columns all around. It's a bit intimidating since you can see what might be a skull on the pediment, along with red-eyed heads scattered around. The couch itself doesn't look very comfortable, and there's a very unnecessary set of stairs leading up to it. Seems like a place where a special guest like a king or the host of the show might sit. I guess being rich doesn't equate to good taste. If you're not lucky enough to score this particular seat, there's rows of stone bleachers separated into upper and lower sections. These don't look comfortable at all, and if I were a rich patron, I wouldn't want to sit here. Towards the sides there are large doors, perhaps storing additional boats, some of which look like gondolas. These flags in particular also have symbols that look like fleur-de-lises, which is a symbol typically associated with France more than Italy, though places such as Florence do use it in their city flag. These are meant to represent lilies and have been used in many emblems and crests throughout history. There's a small dock and decorative arches and angels, which is giving me Venetian vibes, after which you can see this whole area open up to the lake and mountains. Being in a cave, I think the intention was to keep this place a secret from the public, but with it just out in the open, it feels like they might not care, but perhaps this is somewhere very remote. The alternate version of this stage adds a fence around the perimeter. This makes it more like a cage match rather than a gladiator fight, but I guess the spectators are more protected this way. Confrontation, the stage song, starts out with a bombastic trumpet section at the beginning, almost like a fanfare. Unlike other songs in the Soul Calibur 2 OST, there's a drum kit which makes it slightly more modern. This song, rather than being a tense arena where warriors fight to the death, feels almost like someone going on an epic adventure. It's kinda given tournament arc and a shonen anime vibes. The deep purples and blues conveys a sense of luxury and opulence, and honestly, besides from a few elements like the skull and the head scattered about, I could be convinced this was just a private arena for a play or a concert. I don't know if the stage really needed those creepier set pieces. I think you could probably axe them and get the same effect, or you could alternatively lean into the evil gladiator arena thing more by making the colors and song dark and ominous.
A hero desires a sword, and a sword desires truth.
Money Pit is another Italian stage taking place in the Mediterranean Sea and built by a merchant of death, Verci. This is a tomb and storehouse, but booby-trapped to hell to discourage grave robbers. The name Money Pit is almost a little bit tantalizing, like a lure to get more people to come here, because the name implies that there are riches to be found. The platform your characters are standing on is the top level and close to the entrance of the pit, with the treasure being at the very bottom. It's probably one of the most unusual stages in the game, and therefore got assigned to the weirdest characters, Voldo and Yoshimitsu. Voldo is a servant of Verci and is tasked with guarding the vault, so this being his stage actually makes sense from a story perspective. Yoshimitsu's story involves him coming to the money pit in order to get money to give to the poor. Interestingly, his profile mentions that he was able to navigate through the area without encountering the Guardian, aka Voldo, so I guess these two never met up with each other until their eventual destined battle. This area looks similar to a sewer, with less and less light available as you travel downwards. During certain grabs, you can see that this pit is open to the air, but gradually begins to get darker with torches scattered throughout as you wander further inside. This lack of light as you travel down would have an added effect of disorienting any visitors. It could be night, could be day, but as you travel down, you really can't tell. The floor grates your characters are on is held by ropes, also helping to convey a further sense of instability. There's traps and hallways to wander down and get lost in, and to the left there's a hallway leading to who knows where. There's arches and bridges which you actually have to figure out how to lower to get to the other side, and also staircases leading downwards further into the pit. The description mentions a water trap based on the tides, so I'm assuming this has to do with the 3 water wheels in the center of the room, along with the waterfalls coming from the sewer grates on either side. You can hear the creaking and groaning of water spilling onto the wheels in the background, with the sound being quite loud. There are 4 variations on the stage, each with a different sized platform. All the platforms have a spider web and spider in the center, giving the illusion that your characters are caught in a web. The only difference between them is that the second platform is slightly larger, and the third is the smallest size platform. It might actually be the smallest stage in the game. The different size stages help keep the matches more interesting, and with the third variation, it's so tight here that it would be impressive if you were able to stay on for a whole match. The final variation has a fence also with a spider design. If it wasn't obvious enough with this motif, now with the cage being held up by strings, the inspiration is front and center. Interestingly, this cage also has no doors, so there's the additional question of how you even get in and out. With a title like Ordinary Pain, contrary to the name, you know the stage song is gonna be unique. The track is repetitive with random crescendoing and decrescendoing to the point where it's kind of disorienting, almost like you can't tell one part of the song from another. There are loud horns blaring and the discordant chatter of various instruments. The song isn't melodic at all, and the clashing noises creates a tense atmosphere. The stage exemplifies an unsettling environment you don't want to stick around in, with all the dark colors, random pathways, and droning music to that effect. It's not a stage that I particularly vibe with, but I can't deny that it's very effective at what it does. The Labyrinth stage, while not directly stated in the description, is a clear reference to a very famous Greek myth. This story involves an architect named Daedalus and his son Icarus, who are tasked with building a labyrinth on Crete. The labyrinth is meant to contain a monster called the Minotaur, who is part man, part bull. A Greek hero called Theseus, the same Theseus as in Theseus' ship, eventually ends up slaying the Minotaur, and down the line actually becomes the king of Athens. Surrounded by water and crumbling ruins, there's a hallway with stone steps leading into the darkness, with an object that looks like the winged sun above the doorframe. The winged sun is not just Egyptian and has been found in various forms throughout the ancient world, so perhaps this is that. But also could possibly be a reference to a caduceus, which was a staff carried by the Greek god Hermes. With the wings, it also makes me think that it could be a reference to the myth of Icarus, who fastened himself wings made from wax, flew too close to the sun, and plunged to his death. On one side, you have pillars in front of a statue of a hippocampus, which is a creature with the head of a horse but body of a fish. On the opposite side is a man with the hooves of a horse but tail of a fish, called an ichthyocentaur. The walls also have heads hung on them, which have horns similar to depictions of the Minotaur. The variations of this stage have you run through different shaped platforms, with one being a triangle, another a square, and finally a big rectangle. The different shapes also add to the chaos, where getting a ring out becomes more and more unpredictable. You also see these different variations when going through Weapon Master mode. The song is called Labyrinth of the Moonlight, pretty on the nose since the stage takes place in a labyrinth, probably at night. It's a very Middle Eastern sounding song, the main melody carried by a flute, bells, and also the strumming of what might be a simsimia, which is a type of lyre. It's slow-paced and languid, and you hear the sound of water lapping, which contributes to a fantasy dreamlike vibe. There are 5 variations of this song, with varying degrees of speed and instrumentation. Parts 1 and 2 are very similar, while Part 3 heavily features that reedy instrument, maybe a mizmar or argul, and is definitely the most exotic sounding. Part 4 is slightly more upbeat with added percussion and brass, and Part 5 is the most climactic with the fastest tempo. This, combined with the slow-moving fireflies and water reflecting on the walls, gives a very calm, ethereal atmosphere. For a stage called a labyrinth, from what I can tell, this area isn't much of a maze. There really only seems to be one way to go once you enter the room, which is out the other hallway. But perhaps this is just one path of several that are meant to disorient. I think the simplicity of this stage is quite nice. On one hand, you could say that this makes it boring, but I think it really lends itself to an air of mystique.
You again? I've had enough of you!
Haven't you had enough?
Ostrheinsburg Chapel is the second to last stage in arcade mode and where all destined battles or rival battles take place. Interestingly, the rival for the guest character is always Raphael for some reason, while Raphael's rival is Nightmare. Guess everybody just wants a piece of him. Heihachi, Spawn, and Link are assigned to this stage. Examining each profile, the game mentions that Heihachi somehow ended up traveling through time after touching one of the shards of Soul Edge. Spawn has the most straightforward reason: he's here on a mission from his master, though he would have also had to travel through time since he's from present day. I personally would have expected Link's stage to be Eurydice Shrine Gallery, but his profile states that evil events occurring in Hyrule were linked to Soul Edge, and that he's come to this world to destroy it. Ostrheinsburg is a fictitious city located in present-day Germany. Your characters battle on the second floor of a church, surrounded by stained glass windows. The big circular stained glass window at the top, called a rose window, is very characteristic of the Gothic architectural style. This type of architecture was very popular all over Europe in the Middle Ages. There are lancet designs in the embellishment on the wall behind your characters, and also trefoils and pointed arches, which were also common motifs in this style. In each stained glass lancet window, there's a depiction of a medieval warrior, with several holding swords and others with spears and books. The floor here is fairly simple by comparison, mostly just tile with embellishment that helps draw your attention towards the main window. Up above you can see rib vaulting, which was first seen in ancient Roman architecture built around the 2nd century AD, and was used in vaults made with pointed arches in the early 20th century Gothic architecture. There's a huge structure that looks like it might be a pipe organ at first glance, and from here you can clearly see that we're on the 2nd floor. This is a really weird placement to me because the organ would be cut off halfway. But then you look down to the 1st floor and see that it actually might not be an organ because there's no place to sit and play, rather just an altar of sorts underneath, so perhaps this is just some decorative piece that just happens to look like an organ. Still doesn't explain why it would be cut in half like this though. Through broken walls and windows, you can see the stage takes place during the day with fog in the distance. When I actually first saw this stage, I thought that it was at night with the moonlight shining in through the windows, but no, it's clearly overcast. Through a gap, we can also see the ruins of Ostrheinsburg Castle surrounded by hills and water, which appears as a stage in other Soul Calibur games. One of the songs that can play here is called Raise Thy Sword, with lots of organ at the beginning. Fitting because you have that big looking structure in the middle of the stage. Afterwards, the song jumps straight into a tense orchestrated section with violin and brass. There's a constant snare drum in the background that helps maintain the momentum throughout, and it has a very epic, almost militaristic sound. For specific faded battles on the stage in arcade mode, you might hear 2 other songs. But before all that, you might first hear the sound of a bell ringing, which according to the description happens in honor of chosen warriors.
Sis?
The first song that can play, called If There Were Any Other Way, actually has melodic lines from other songs, such as Sophitia's theme from Soul Calibur and the introduction song. Once I started to connect those dots between the songs, my mind was blown. It's honestly such an amazing orchestrated piece, but also with some guitar and drum kit to make it sound slightly more modern. It's melancholy and dramatic, with bits of choir sneaking in to enhance that effect. The second song, called Nothing to Lose, is much more of a dark and intimidating piece, with this electric guitar strum added at the beginning along with loud brass and percussion. It does have sections that suddenly become more lighthearted with flute and bagpipes, which adds a nice contrast. It's similarly very powerful sounding, but I think is much more aggressive comparatively. The color palette is quite muted, with mostly grays and low saturated greens and blues. Combined with the stage taking place in a decrepit church and the rolling fog, it seems almost haunting. With the music though, I would say the tone really changes depending on which one you get. It can become more of an epic duel between allies, or a ruthless battle to the death between bitter enemies. Either way, it's a fitting backdrop to your character's destined battles, being where all the rival cutscenes take place. The background could go well with any of these, but I do have to say my favorite is definitely If There Were Any Other Way.
The terror known as the catastrophe has revealed itself.
The final, unselectable stage can only be accessed when you fight the boss of the game, Inferno. In some games, stages aren't selectable due to technical aspects, but I don't think this is the case here since there are plenty of equally resource-intensive stages in this game. Also, not being able to pick it almost makes it more special, like you have to earn your way to seeing it. The battle seems to take place in Hell, or perhaps even in Soul Edge itself, since you return to the chapel once the match is over. The rocky ground is streaked by veins of lava and stalagmites, the sky painted a fiery red, and your opponent literally on fire. A cool effect here is that the more you hurt Inferno, the more fire appears from the floor below. The background has this hazy effect to it as well, which is a bit disorienting, maybe smoke or fog. The stage isn't overly complicated, but it does what it sets out to do well. The song is very serious, called Hellfire. It starts off heavy with an organ, after which you hear vocals. This intro immediately reminds me of something you'd hear in a church. As the match begins and the percussion hits, the pace picks up with very quick violin lines in the background. Contrary to the name though, I wouldn't say this is an evil sounding piece, it more so underscores the stakes at hand. Not sure how your characters got here, but it does fit the vibes of being a boss stage, and the hell-like setting and epic music is quite fitting. Soul Calibur 2 is a legendary game from a series that draws heavily from real-life history set in an alternative timeline. While Soul Edge and Soul Calibur were amazing games in their own right, this entry really set the series on the map. While later games weren't quite as popular or famous, they would continue to expand upon the foundation set by this one, such as with the use of guest characters. It's also when the series started solidifying the identity of its stages. No more were they essentially just Virtua Fighter arenas with pre-rendered backgrounds, but a living, breathing place that could be interacted with. This was the first time stages had walls and even stage gimmicks. All of these I'd just love to walk around in and explore. The sense of how grand and diverse this world is shown through these backgrounds. The devs really took their time to give history and backstory to these stages and how our characters interacted within them, which just goes to show how much care they put into this world. I'm happy I was able to tell these stories, and I hope I did them justice.